Teachers who've had a student that stubbornly believed easily disprovable things. Flat earth, creationism, sovereign citizen. How did you handle it? I teach US history. Some kids have come across various conspiracy theories. That is, the moon landing was faked. My standard response is that something of that nature could potentially be true, but the evidence is lacking and the more simple answer is more likely to be true. It's hard to believe that the Soviets would be quiet if their enemy are pretending a moon landing. Sort of related. I got children to take a survey, answering questions about what they believed the government policy should be on certain issues. Then, based on their answers, for example, mostly A, mostly B, mostly C, I told them which political party their beliefs matched with the best. It seriously flipped the crap out of some kids. They flatly refused to believe their results. Kids from conservative families found themselves agreeing mostly with the Green Party, while kids from hippie families discovered they agreed with the most conservative party. I was just like, well, support whomever you like, but this is who you mostly agree with on these issues. Politely asked them follow-up questions until their contradictions or otherwise total lack of logic became apparent to all the other students in the room. The murmurs and suppressed laughs are enough. The Socratic method. It's existed for 2,500 years for a reason. Late to the party, but I had a 13-year-old student who said that he hates racism. He told me about how there is a Muslim guy on his soccer team and some of the other boys call him a terrorist. He said it isn't fair because even though most Muslims are terrorists, he isn't a terrorist. I asked him about what he meant about Muslims being terrorists and he said that about 70% are terrorists. I told him that is incorrect, and given that they are a religion of 1.6-ish billion and we'd be in trouble if that was the case. He refused to accept it and kept saying that he wasn't racist but most Muslims are terrorists. I work with a guy like that. He also thought the population of the earth was 200 trillion, so I think in both cases it's a lack of number sense. I work with a guy that is a flat earth believer / 9/11 and moon landing denier. After many discussions with him about facts and science, arguing with him, I discovered his belief had nothing to do with facts or science. Every one of his reasons about not believing the facts or science was that it is all a conspiracy against us. Didn't matter what was presented to him. His brain just wouldn't allow him to believe it, but it is all a conspiracy. Only facts he presented were based on YouTube videos. He just could not wrap his brain around the idea that newspapers and TV aren't evil entities hiding the real facts to control us. Finally started to break through with my go-to argument. My argument back was the world is controlled by money. Newspapers and TV are in it to make money. If they don't make money, people lose their jobs. So don't you think if they could one-up their competitors by breaking the biggest story ever, that the world is flat, that they would do it in a heartbeat? It would be a huge monetary windfall for them. You can see the wheels turning as he tries to fight the urge to go back to his old standby arguments. Still believes his arguments but not nearly as strong. I would give them a reason why they think that, then give them the truth with the support of logic, reason, scientific research, scientific evidence, mathematical proof, and historical evidence. I had a Holocaust denier a few years back and I rip him a new butthole with the amount of proof there is that the Holocaust happened. I think I read that someone, can't remember who, told people to preserve as much Holocaust evidence as they could after it was over. He knew someone would eventually deny it. A family friend that doesn't let her kids eat pork or catfish or crustaceans because of the Bible, only listens to Christian music and is an anti-vaxxer, told me she had enrolled in the local college to finish her degree in teaching. As a friend, I was genuinely pleased to see her better herself. I asked her what she wanted to teach, and when she told me high school science, I was stunned speechless, before laughing uncontrollably for several minutes. I called her on it too. I was a camp counselor for a Christian youth group in North Carolina. This particular camp was fed from recruitment programs that go out to vacation Bible schools. A vacation Bible school, or VBA, is basically a week or 2 week long camp that an individual church will run as a sort of fun way of getting youth members both educated and involved with the church. So this camp was sort of like a combined VBA from many churches. Anyway, I was hired because of my history and experience with nature, BSA, so my job was to teach the kids about natural gifts of God, read, Nature. Well, it just so happened that there were a couple of children who were being raised as flat earthers. I was already under scrutiny because of some biology comments I had made. Who would have thought there were biological sciences in nature? So I knew I wouldn't argue the point. Instead, I told these kids to get their parents to take them to Mount Mitchell and to observe the world with their own eyes and see if the edges were flat or curved. I was fired 3 days later because a parent complained that I was brainwashing her kid by telling him to look at the world with his own 2 eyes. Not a teacher, but I did have 2 Jehovah's Witnesses show up one day to tell me that evolution was not real. It was an older guy, maybe 50, and a young girl, maybe 19. I couldn't resist going over Darwin's argument and threw in examples of evolutionary events within our lifetime. I could tell the girl was thinking about what I said seriously, and the guy had a really concerned look on his face. He stops me and says he enjoyed our talk and wanted to come by again. He never did. In fact, I haven't seen any Jehovah's Witnesses since then. I don't teach, but I constantly argue with flat earthers. Almost daily. The universe isn't responsible for their stupidity. I've seen on several occasions these people ignoring evidence that sits in front of them. I came to the conclusion that the majority of these people choose to believe the hypothesis. So, somewhere deep down hidden behind their tiny subconscious, they know the earth is round. They ignore that rationality though, and substitute it with the flat earth hypothesis so they can feel special and be a part of the flat earth community. To this day, not a single flat earther can prove it. Nobody ever presents evidence. Ever. They try to, but it's always the same. Misinterpreted science. There must be some kind of spectrum for these people because they are always insulting and abusive, and always expect to be revered for their discoveries regarding the hypothesis. They get their facts wrong. Their math wrong. They build arguments out of misunderstood science and then run tangents with them thinking they are onto something. The flat earth hypothesis is weaker than a wet noodle. Don't fall for this crap. Look at some of the more interesting conspiracy theories. If the earth was flat, it would follow that when the sun came up it would be daylight everywhere. Tell them to wait until it's noon, then ask an internet friend on the opposite side of the world to verify that the sun is also overhead where they are. I'm almost certain the answer will be negative. I have a student who stubbornly believes that North Korea is a paradise and that every article about the conditions there is just Western propaganda. He also refuses to acknowledge the reality of the deaths and oppression in communist Russia, Mao's China, Castro's Cuba, etc. Everything I show him to the contrary is disregarded as fake news basically. I have no idea what to do with him. Buy him a plane ticket and wave goodbye. A little bit of a reverse story here. I'm a student, but I had a high school teacher back when that believed in creationism. She always talked about being religious, but it never really crossed any lines so no one said anything. Yet, one day during a student seminar, where the teacher was supposed to observe and not talk, someone mentioned how the existence of God cannot technically be proved. She interrupted to say, neither can evolution. I kid you not. She said this multiple times over the year as well. Us students tried giving her facts, but she ended up shutting them down by giving us lectures about respecting each other's beliefs. Definitely was an interesting class. Not a teacher, but my English teacher is a creationist, and a naive one as well. For one of my book reports I read a book called Experts Speak. Basically a collection of incorrect quotes throughout history. My friend and I knew she was a creationist, so I chose a quote that said the world was 6,000 years old from a 17th century philosopher. I proceeded to explain why the quote was wrong and she questioned me in front of my whole English class. I'm in 9th grade. She asked how I knew the earth was 4.5 billion years old. The stifled laughs were pretty funny to hear. Afterwards I had my conference with her and she was told me that I have to respect others' opinions and that I might hurt someone's feelings. I told her that I wasn't concerned about that. I don't know of any other creationists in my school. I asked her why she thought creationism was right and she said, I have faith. It's become a meme in my school now when someone can't answer a question. I feel a tad bit guilty because she's a nice lady, but I still think that creationism is setting back our society. I used to teach middle school science in rural southern Illinois, and this area is similar to the Bible Belt. Each spring I would teach evolution, natural selection, and life over time. One year, I was told I needed to go to a meeting after school in the principal's office to meet with a parent. No big deal. I've been teaching for quite a while and know almost everyone. Time to figure out what the problem is. As I walked into the office, a prominent man was sitting across from the principal's desk looking very upset. During the meeting the principal told me that, let's call him Mr. L. He was upset that I was teaching and manipulating his daughter into believing things that weren't true, like BB, evolution, etc. I said, sir, I respect your beliefs. I've told students that I will show them how science explains the concepts we are covering. He didn't care. He wanted to debate me, which I refused to do. He handed me a Bible and told me to read it because I should start to repent for my sins. I start to giggle because I said, sir, I'm familiar with the Bible. I went to a private Catholic school from kindergarten to my senior year of high school. Still not satisfied. He then hands me a copy of all of Ken Hovine's DVDs and told me I should watch them because this is what science actually is. I did watch the Hovine DVDs but only to see what I was up against. Needless to say, the man talked to me at his daughter's 8th grade graduation, shook my hand and thanked me for my work. Weird. Needless to say, the man talked to me at his daughter's 8th grade graduation, shook my hand and thanked me for my work. Weird. I'm not sure you're using needless to say correctly, unless you left part of the story out or I missed a point you were trying to make. When I taught in China, a 6-year-old refused to believe there were more than 37 38 colors. We were talking about how the human eye can see millions of colors. I told him to pick a color. He chose green. I had everyone in the class get up and touch something green. I asked him if they were all the same green number. Did it with a few more colors. His mind was blown. I work with delinquent teens. On Thursday, as we were reading the murders in the Rue Morgue, one student was adamant that a monkey and an orangutan are the same animal. I checked. He did not mean the same family. He literally meant the same animal, as he is a popular kid and other students were starting to side with his derailment of the class. Because he was yelling and loud and I was calm and using my normal voice, I turned to the smartboard projector, went to Google Images, and typed in monkey. I grabbed one of the first 3 pictures and pinned it to the board. Then I searched tape, and did the same, and finally got around to orangutan with all 3 pictures on the board. I pointed out that they're less similar than a Saint Bernard and a Chihuahua, because they are unable to mate and produce offspring. Most of the class went on to agree with me because of the offspring thing. But the one kid kept yelling that they're all the same animal. I asked him to read the next paragraph, as we'd wasted a lot of time. He asked which page. I said we're on page 55, but you can read page 42, because they are all the same anyway. He looked at me, smiled, then got back to work. But I essentially spent 10% of my work week debunking conspiracy theories, either through simple logic, basic science, or when it gets tricky, the internet, where they are learning all these crazy things in the first place. 6th grade history, before a film on the remains of Lucy, early hominid. Kid, what if I don't believe in this? Me, what do you mean? K, well, I believe in God. Me, okay, what do you call your God? K, huh, me, well, people call their gods different things. Do you call your God Allah, or Yahweh, or Shiva, or what? K, just God. Me, Jesus, maybe? K, relieved. Yeah, that one. Me, okay, I want you to watch this movie very carefully then. If you hear any point where it says, Jesus is wrong or Jesus doesn't exist, just let me know and we can talk about it or I'll even let you go to the other room. Okay? K. Okay, I guess. She loved the film. Whoa, that was super interesting. Kids are so great. If they're bringing up their nonsense during class, I tell them to bring their questions comments to me after class or during my office hours. If it's a discussion we're having outside of class, I just tell them that I prefer scientific evidence when evaluating the truth or falsity of a claim, and I explain that it's okay to disagree, which should serve as a clue to them that the conversation is over. Well, I have a professor who thinks genetically modified foods are created to kill us all. The scientific evidence against her theory is all results of evil researchers that are funded by big companies like Monsanto and etc. I can't believe she has a PhD. I went to elementary school with a girl from a very religious family with some pretty extreme beliefs, or lack of certain beliefs. Her parents specifically asked that she be allowed to sit out on certain parts of the curriculum, on religious grounds. These topics included evolution, not surprising, but also things like continental drift and tectonic plates, human anatomy, and even parts of our history classes that dealt with things like slavery. She was allowed to sit out, but I think she still had to answer questions related on these topics on the final exam. Then again, this was back in 1998 when the laws and regulations in my state might have been different. I think they were changed circa 2002. Why don't you just say 1998 and 2002? I taught for a few semesters at a religious high school, but most of my students were fairly level-headed, slightly cynical young people on the subject of religion. A couple of moments knocked me for a loop and reminded me where I worked. However, I did a short unit on the Megalodon documentary Discovery Channel put out to teach about trusting sources and checking accuracy, in the middle of explaining that no megalodon teeth have been found more recently than 10,000 years ago. I had a student raise his hand to ask, completely seriously, if that was before or after God sent the flood to wash the earth clean. I honestly was dumbstruck for several moments, and since refuting his question entirely would probably have gotten me fired, I eventually answered after? Well, that's a good question. We're not exactly sure when the flood happened as we've never found any scientific evidence to give us a specific date, so I can't say for sure if it was before or after. I can tell you that the newest megalodon teeth we've found are about 10,000 years old though. Not the teacher. I used to be the student. I went to a Christian high school, but I also went to a semi-crazy junior high that taught young earth and the like. I pretty much took it at face value and stuck with it. Then I went to high school. Every science teacher and every Bible teacher basically told me, in nicer words than this, you know that doesn't make any freaking sense, right? And that was the beginning of me learning that beliefs must be substantiated. Still a Christian, but now I've stopped buying baseless rhetoric and actually gotten the itch to learn the objective, logical proof behind things, which includes the obvious, the earth is old, global warming is real, etc. So thankful for good teachers who were willing to put up with me for as long as it took. If someone as stubborn as I was can be reached, there's hope for your students as well. Not a teacher, but I vividly remember in 12th grade our science teacher saying, after explaining how the earth was formed and everything came to be, and if you believe God did all this, well then this is how he did it. Current student teacher. Hasn't come up yet, but if it does, I would point out that if they want to pass, they better know who, what, why, and how of evolution, regardless of what they believe. I can't take a test on Harry Potter on BuzzFeed and pass with a perfect score. Do I believe Harry Potter is real? Number. A history teacher of mine in high school actually used Holocaust denial as a way to teach his students about the importance of primary, secondary, tertiary sources. He announced that one class would be a debate of him denying it, and the class had to prove it, but we could only use primary sources. None of his classes won, and most were completely emotionally exasperated. It taught us, or at least myself, the importance of not getting emotional in a debate, and the importance of having good sources. The next day he confirmed that of course it happened, and the proof is that there are still detectable levels of the gas used in the gas chambers and the chamber walls. Most creationists will accept evolution on the small scale. The influenza virus mutates every year, so that it can circumvent immunity. Bacteria mutate and become resistant against antibiotics. When circumstances require it, animals will become a little bit bigger or smaller, or chance color. Most creationists will accept natural selection and mutations in bacteria, proving that the same mechanism, mutation and selection, made humans evolve out of monkeys is much harder. As an amateur, you don't have access to the data, and if there is proof at all, it is not at a single point where you can go and see it. You have to trust some people, and they trust other people. It is relatively easy to refute the literal interpretation of the creation story in the Bible. Humans are clearly older than 6,000 years. An important aspect of Genesis is that all imperfection came into the world because of Adam's fall. This can be easily disproven, because there were massive extinctions before humans existed, and carnivores existed long before humans. In summary, my answer is, convince them of evolution on the small scale, and convince them that a literal interpretation of Genesis cannot be maintained. For the rest, let them believe what they want. Upvoted. But please remember that humans did not evolve out of monkeys. Buying into that rhetoric will just make discussion harder. We do share a common ancestor though. Not a teacher, but whenever I discuss debate with people who hold such beliefs, I usually have to go to the same point. The burden of proof lies with the person making the claim, not the other way around. It's not my job to disprove flat earth when we've had evidence for millennia that it's not, or to disprove the existence of God when there's no evidence. It's so frustrating that people don't understand such a simple concept. You prove a positive claim by providing evidence, and you reject a positive claim when you have evidence to the contrary or there is a lack of evidence. You don't prove a negative claim. True, but the people who point this out often don't know what a negative claim is. They generally take it to mean positive statement I consider self-evident, as you are doing now. The earth is round is exactly as much a positive claim as the earth is flat, just a much better supported one. Not sure if this belongs here, but this reminds me of something. My mother was all over church. I was 5 years old and I really hadn't any concept of God. I mentioned God to my dad, and he told me that I didn't have believe in that. He went out and bought the soundtrack of Porgy and Bess. He dropped the needle on It Ain't Necessary So. He was amazing as a dad could get. The stuff that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessary so. Not a teacher, like so many here, but I was definitely the student to a small degree in high school, early 2000s. I was all about global warming being a natural phenomenon and not being man-made and all that. The ultimate source was that most of my information on the subject on both sides was highly politicized. Both the arguments for and against, at the time, came from sources that were very vested in their political views one way or another. It wasn't until I grew up a little bit more and started doing more debates that I kinda realized I had to look into the subjects more, and was introduced to some fairly neutral sources by one of my science teachers my senior year. What I took away from it is that your sources really do matter, even the sources for or in support of your viewpoint. That, and the fact that way too many scientific issues have become political ones. I learned that pretty quick, too. I have a few tattoos of science subjects on my left arm. I work at an auto parts store right now. A few weeks ago I was helping a guy find the brakes and rotors for his vehicle when he made a comment on one of my tattoos. It's about Galileo. When I explained this to him, he asked me if I knew about Galileo recanting his claims and that it was all made up. He seriously argued in favor of geocentrism. Went on about a very credible book written by a very logical man. I just laughed and told him that I highly doubted his claims and that as a student of science I bet the author of his little book was a fraud. Did some homework on it after he left. It was a slow day, and it was just as I suspected. The author had no degrees in physics or space, but proudly touted a PhD in theology from an online college based in Vanuatu. I was teaching English in Japan while in university for a semester. I had this student. He really hated foreign English teachers. He thought we all just came there to bang Japanese girls. Basically, he hated foreign teachers. I handled it by banging his older sister. Way to go, OP. Now the dude's gonna really hate foreign English teachers. I had an 8th grader who had transferred in from NY and he was sure that the pyramids were older than dinosaurs. They were mountains, he insisted, and mountains were here before dinosaurs. I'm a history teacher, so I showed him blueprints and books on the pyramids, dates they were built, etc. He was still convinced that if I wasn't there to see them built I couldn't be sure. He was a really troubled kid and it wasn't part of our US history curriculum, so I didn't want to push the issue too strongly. Eventually he conceded that high quality, modern photographs make them look like individual carved blocks, which is unusual for a mountain. He never fully admitted he changed his mind, but I'm optimistic he left with the notion dispelled. California. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.